Imagine you were renovating an old, beautiful Victorian house. You've been working at it for
Well,
weeks.
the classic fixer-upper dream.
Right, exactly. But you're in the thick of it. You're pulling down some cracked, water-damaged plaster in the main hallway. The air is just thick. Dust is flying everywhere, coating your clothes.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. And you swing your hammer, and suddenly it hits something hollow in the wall cavity. Not wood, not a pipe. It's a strange, resonant clink.
Oh, I don't like where this is going.
So you put the hammer down, you reach into that dark, dusty space between the studs, and your fingers brush against cold glass.
Yep. Nope. I'd be out.
But you pull it out. You pull out this old green glass bottle, but it's not empty. It's sealed tight with thick black wax, and inside, suspended in some cloudy liquid, you can see rusted iron nails, thorny rose stems, and what looks like a tangled clump of human hair.
A classic witch bottle.
Exactly. Now, logically, rationally, you're just holding a piece of antique trash. I mean, it's just oxidized metal, plant matter, and keratin stuffed into old glass. But your heart instantly drops into your stomach. Your palm starts to sweat.
Because you know you're not supposed to touch it.
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt, you aren't scared of the glass, you're scared of the story. And that is exactly what we are exploring today. Welcome to this deep dive.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. Because today, for the listener who loves digging into the mechanics of storytelling, you know who you are, we are unpacking the exact narrative machinery writers use to turn antique trash into absolute terror.
We really are. We want to know how and why physical items are used to terrify us.
Right. And we're looking at some incredible research for this exploration. We're pulling from an analysis by horror scholar L. Marie Wood on the nature of cursed objects, a really brilliant essay into the revolutionary ghost stories of M.R. James.
That's a fascinating one, yeah.
Oh, it's so good. We also have academic papers on folk Gothic and found manuscripts, and a really fascinating historical document detailing the real-world legend of the Luck of Edenhall. Plus, its bizarre connection to H.P. Lovecraft.
A lot of ground to cover.
So much ground. Okay, let's unpack this. Why do objects inherently fascinate us in storytelling?
Well, we have to start by looking at how the human brain processes the unknown, right?
Okay.
When we encounter the supernatural or like the mythological in a story, it is by definition abstract. It's ethereal. You can't touch a curse.
Right, it's just a concept.
Exactly. But in Elmarie Wood's analysis of cursed objects, she points out something really fundamental. A cursed object acts as a physical bridge between the mundane world we understand and the mystical forces we don't.
So it grounds it.
Yes. It takes a massive, incomprehensible concept like eternal damnation or some generational hex, and it grounds it in something you can touch, see, and, hold in the palm of your hand.
It forces the abstract into reality.
Right. It defies logical explanation, yet there it sits, heavily, on your coffee table. It forces the unknown right into your living room.
It makes it undeniable. Wood brings up some classic examples in her piece that I think everyone has encountered at some point, like The Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs.
Oh, yeah, the classic 1902 story.
Exactly. A family acquires this mummified monkey's paw that grants 3 wishes, but every single wish comes with horrific, ironic consequences.
Right. If you wish for money, your son dies in a factory accident.
Yes, and you get the exact amount as a settlement. It's brutal.
Yeah.
But the fear doesn't just come from the wishes themselves. It comes from the object. Jacobs describes the paw as dried, shriveled, and like moving in the father's hand like a snake when a wish is made.
Which is such a visceral image.
It really is.
Yeah.
The object isn't just a prop. It is the physical embodiment of these massive themes. Fate, human greed, the hubris of trying to tamper with the natural order.
And think about the tactile nature of that. Holding a shriveled, mummified piece of an animal, the physical revulsion you feel mirrors the moral revulsion of the narrative.
That's a great way to put it.
Or consider Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh, classic.
Right, we all know the premise. A young man stays forever youthful while his hidden portrait absorbs all of his physical aging and moral corruption.
So the painting is basically a ledger.
Literally. It operates as a literal, tangible ledger of Dorian's soul. As he commits worse and worse acts, the paint itself warps, the face turns cruel, the hands look stained with blood.
It's the price of vanity made physical.
Exactly. But by making it a physical painting, Wilde forces his protagonist to actually lock his sins in an attic. He has to cover it with a cloth. He has to physically interact with his own rotting morality.
He can't just ignore a vague feeling of guilt. He has to look at it.
Mhm.
Which brings up another fantastic example from the sources, The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins.
Published back in 1868.
Yeah, people often call it the first true detective novel in the English language. Have you read it?
I have, yeah. It revolves around that massive cursed yellow diamond.
An opal, right? Yes. Plundered from a Hindu temple by an English officer. And the stone makes its way to England and just brings absolute chaos and misfortune to the family that inherits it.
And the Moonstone is brilliant because it adds another layer to this whole concept we're talking about. The object isn't just cursed by some vague magical incantation.
Right, it's not just a spooky spell.
Exactly. It carries the heavy, unavoidable, thematic weight of colonialism and cultural theft.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about it. The British Empire at the time was extracting unimaginable wealth from across the globe, bringing these exotic, sacred artifacts back to London drawing rooms.
Just treating them as trophies.
Right. So the curse of the Moonstone is really a manifestation of the guilt of empire. It's the anxiety that the things you have stolen will ultimately destroy your own home.
That is so true.
Mm.
The physical stone sits on an English lady's vanity table, radiating the violence of how it was acquired. It's incredible how much narrative weight a single stone can hold.
It really is.
Which brings us to a concept from our literary notes that I am absolutely obsessed with. They call it the narrative compression engine.
Yes. This essentially explains how these cursed objects revolutionized the actual pacing of how stories were written.
So how does that work mechanically?
Well, this is where we look at the mechanics of writing itself. Before authors widely utilized hidden or cursed objects as central plot devices, Gothic stories often required agonizingly long, extensive exposition.
Like pages and pages of backstory.
Exactly. If a writer in the early 1800s wanted to introduce a curse or some deep historical trauma affecting a family, they had to rely on really cumbersome tools. You'd have a narrator giving a 10-page monologue about the family's dark history.
Or the protagonists were like, sit down and read a dusty, endlessly long diary entry left by their grandfather.
Right, which can completely drag the momentum of a thriller down to a crawl. You're reading a scary story and suddenly you have to sit through a history lesson.
It totally kills the vibe.
It does. But the introduction of the physical hidden object changed the architectural structure of storytelling. It allowed writers to condense centuries of history, emotion, and trauma into a single tactile item.
Okay, so think back to my example at the start, pulling that glass bottle out of the wall.
Yes, perfect example. The author doesn't need to spend 20 pages explaining that an oppressive, superstitious dread plagued the people who built that house.
Because you're holding it.
Exactly. The object is immediate physical proof. By finding a witch bottle, the reader instantly understands the fear, the desperation, and the history of the space. It's the ultimate application of show, don't tell.
It brings the traumatic past and the innocent present into a high-speed collision in the reader's mind, all centered on one physical thing.
Absolutely.
I love thinking about it as a narrative zip file. You know, like you're clicking it, or in this case, digging it up out of the dirt, and instantly, boom, 100 years of curses unpack themselves right into the room.
A narrative zip file is a very useful way to visualize it. It's an incredibly efficient piece of narrative technology. It drastically accelerates the pacing of mystery fiction, creating immediate atmospheric dread without needing a history textbook.
But okay, if a fictional narrative zip file is that powerful, what happens when this exact literary myth-making process is applied to a real physical object in the real world?
Oh, this is where it gets crazy.
Right, because the sources we're looking at today don't just stay in the realm of fiction, they explore this real-life artifact known as the Luck of Edenhall.
This is one of the most fascinating case studies in antiquarian folklore. The Luck of Edenhall is a very real, tangible artifact. It belonged to the Musgrave family, which was a prominent noble family in Cumberland, England, up in the north, near the Scottish borders.
And we have to describe the artifact itself before we get into the legend because it is stunning, and its physical reality is completely at odds with the spooky myths surrounding it.
Very much so.
So, the Luck of Edenhall is an enameled and gilded glass beaker from the 14th century. It was made in the Mamluk style, which means it was crafted in Syria or Egypt.
Right.
It's covered in these incredibly intricate blue, green, red, and white arabesque designs, all delicately outlined in gold. I mean, it's a masterpiece of Islamic glassmaking.
And you have to consider how something like that ends up in a manor house in northern England in the Middle Ages.
Right, that's a long journey.
A very long journey. It almost certainly made its way across Europe via Venetian trade routes, eventually being purchased by or gifted to the Musgrave family. It was a wildly exotic, fragile, and astronomically expensive item for the time.
Just a total flex to own something like that.
Exactly. And by the 15th century, the family prized it so much that a custom protective boiled leather case was crafted just for it. And this case is where the story starts to get interesting.
Yes. Tell them about the case.
So the leather case is inscribed with the letters IHS.
Which stands for Isis Hominum Salvator, or Jesus Savior of Mankind.
Yes. Now, why would a family put a Christian monogram on an imported Islamic glass?
That's the big question.
Scholars believe this was essentially a 15th century security system. By giving this beautiful foreign glass beaker a false aura of Christian sanctity, the family was protecting it from being destroyed during periods of religious upheaval.
Or just stolen by superstitious servants, right?
Exactly. They sanctified the object to protect it.
But the Christian monogram isn't what made the glass famous.
Yeah.
The real protection, or really the real dread, came from a localized fairy legend.
Right, the migratory legend associated with the beaker. It claims that one night, a member of the Musgrave household, sometimes they say it was the lord, sometimes a butler, went out to fetch water from St. Cuthbert's well on the Edenhall estate.
Just normal chore.
Just fetching water. But there, they stumbled upon a group of fairies drinking and dancing around the water.
Using this specific glass.
Yes, and the humans startled the fairies, and in their haste to flee, they left behind this gorgeous glass cup, so the humans snatched it up.
As you do. Finders keepers.
Finders keepers. The fairies tried to retrieve it, but couldn't. So before vanishing, they pronounced a rhyming curse upon the glass.
I love the rhyme. It goes, if the glass either break or fall, farewell to the Luck of Edenhall.
It's so dramatic.
It's the ultimate high-stakes physical object. You have an incredibly fragile piece of 14th century glass and an ancient fairy curse telling you that if you drop this one cup, your entire noble lineage, your lands, your wealth, everything just collapses.
Talk about pressure.
Right. Don't let the kids play in the dining room. But the timeline provided in our sources reveals something astonishing. The legend wasn't actually ancient at all. We can actually trace, decade by decade, how literature literally built this curse out of thin air.
It is a masterclass in how texts can alter reality. The timeline is highly documented in our research.
Break it down for us.
So, in 1666, an antiquarian named Thomas Maffall visits the estate and makes a rather terrible, inaccurate drawing of the glass in his notebook. He just notes it's an interesting curiosity.
No mention of fairies.
No fairies. By 1677, we see the family officially referring to it in their legal wills as the Luck of Edenhall. But still, there's no mention of fairies destroying the family.
Okay, so when does the myth start?
The literary explosion doesn't happen until the 18th century. In 1721, Duke Philip of Wharton, who was a notorious rake and a bit of a troublemaker, writes a comic ballad called The Earl's Defeat.
And this was just a funny poem about a drinking match, right?
Exactly. A massive drinking match that took place at the Edenhall estate. And in the original version, the luck wasn't even mentioned.
But then we hit 1729.
Right.
The ballad is republished in London, and suddenly a brand new stanza about the fairy curse of the Luck of Edenhall is forcefully injected into the text.
Out of nowhere.
Some publisher or editor decided the drinking song just needed a supernatural punch, and it completely works. By 1791, a reverend publishes this revised ballad alongside an allegedly ancient account of the fairy legend in the Gentleman's Magazine, which was a hugely popular publication at the time.
So, in one fell swoop, the physical glass and the fictional curse are cemented together in the public consciousness forever.
It's wild. The printing press essentially acted as a multiplier for a localized piece of folklore.
And it didn't start at the English border. The story captivated the romantic imagination of all of Europe.
Right, because of the German poet.
Yes. In 1834, the renowned German poet Johann Ludwig Uhland writes a deeply dramatic, highly fictionalized poem called Das Glück von Edenhall.
And what happens in his version?
Oh, in Ulin's version, the young lord of the manor arrogantly demands the glass be brought out for a feast. He toasts with it carelessly, and the glass shatters.
Man.
Immediately, the vault of the great hall cracks open, flames burst through the floorboards, invading foes storm the castle, and the entire Musgrave family is violently wiped from the earth.
Talk about taking a fairy tale and turning it into a Michael Bay movie. It's incredibly dramatic. And then in 1841, the famous American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow translates Ulin's poem into English.
Which is when it really explodes.
It becomes a massive hit. Everyone in the English-speaking world knows about this cursed glass that shattered and destroyed a family, which leads to one of the most amusing anecdotes in all of our research.
This is my favorite part.
When Longfellow actually traveled to England and visited the Edenhall estate in 1868, Sir George Musgrave confronted him.
Just march right up to him.
Sir George actually scolded one of America's most famous poets for fictional vandalism, because in the real world, the glass was sitting right there, perfectly intact.
It perfectly demonstrates the tension between the physical object and the narrative layered on top of it. The text had created a reality so vivid, so widely accepted, that the family felt the need to vigorously defend the physical object against its fictional counterpart.
The poem had done more damage to the family's peace of mind than the glass ever could.
Exactly. And this literary legacy proved incredibly resilient, reaching all the way into the 20th century to capture the imagination of none other than H.P. Lovecraft.
Yes. I was hoping we'd get to this. The master of cosmic horror himself gets tangled up in this.
He really does.
In a letter written in 1934, Lovecraft claimed that he was actually distantly related to the Musgraves. He did all this genealogical digging and claimed descent from an 11th century companion of William the Conqueror.
Now, our source notes that Lovecraft calculated he was an 8th cousin, 9 times removed.
So we're talking about an incredibly stretched thread of connection.
Very stretched. But Lovecraft absolutely loved it. He was obsessed with lineage and the idea of inherited doom, which, as we know, is a massive theme in his own writing.
Exactly. And he wrote in this letter that the Luck of Edenhall was the only weird legend connected to his own ancestry.
Which he must have been thrilled about.
He was. By this time, the glass had survived intact and had been moved to the Victorian Albert Museum in London for safekeeping. And Lovecraft, a man who invented ancient gods that could drive you insane just by looking at them, explicitly wrote that he hoped no one at the museum would smash the glass, lest it bring some sort of ancient evil upon his Musgrave side.
The irony is profound. A 14th century glass beaker from Syria wasn't cursed by fairies at a well. It was cursed by antiquarians, poets, and ballad writers.
Yeah.
They took a beautiful piece of imported craftsmanship and systematically injected it with centuries of narrative dread, until one of the greatest horror writers of the 20th century was sitting in America, genuinely hoping a museum curator didn't drop it.
It shows how literature doesn't just reflect our perception of a real-world antique. It can permanently alter its reality.
It really can.
Now, if a physical object like a glass cup can be layered with fictional dread, what happens when the artifact itself is made of words? I mean, a glass can break, but a manuscript can be altered, translated, forged. Let's look at the found manuscript trope.
Oh, this is a great pivot, because the found manuscript is a foundational literary technology, and it operates as a highly sophisticated metafictional tool.
Okay, break that down for us. What is the premise?
The premise is deceptively simple. The author presents the book not as a work of their own imagination, but claims they merely discovered an existing historical manuscript in an old trunk or a ruined monastery, and they are simply translating or publishing it for the public.
It's the ultimate authorial dodge. The writer gets to say, hey, don't look at me. I'm just the messenger. I didn't make up this terrifying story about a demon. I just found this diary, and I'm as freaked out as you are.
Exactly. It creates a protective layer between the author and the text. But more importantly, it deeply enhances the narrative credibility for the reader.
Because it feels real.
Yes, it actively blurs the boundary between fiction and reality, and its roots are deep in literary history. One of the earliest modern examples is Miguel de Cervantes' masterpiece, Don Quixote, published in the early 1600s.
Wait, really? Don Quixote used this?
Oh, absolutely. Cervantes famously claimed that he didn't write the story of the errant knight. He claimed the book was translated from an Arabic text written by a Moorish historian named Cid Hamet Benengeli.
He created a fake author to give his fiction historical weight.
Exactly. And this technique became the absolute backbone of the Gothic genre in the 18th century. Take Horace Walpole's 1764 novel The Castle of Otranto, which scholars widely agree it basically invented Gothic fiction as we know it.
And what was his claim?
That book purported to be a translation of a newly discovered, much older Italian manuscript dating back to the era of the Crusades.
So smart.
Then you have James McPherson in the 1760s, who claimed his Ossian poems were literal translations of ancient epic Scotty poetry that he just happened to have discovered in the Highlands.
And didn't those poems cause a massive controversy?
Oh, huge. The Ossian poems are a perfect example because they caused a massive debate across Europe. People argued fiercely over whether they were authentic ancient texts or brilliant modern forgeries by McPherson.
I think our notes mentioned Thomas Jefferson loved them.
He did. Jefferson famously loved them and thought they were entirely real. The debate itself fueled the fascination. But our source from Text Matters explains that this isn't just an antiquated literary trick that died out in the 1800s.
Right.
The trope survived by undergoing what academics call intersemiotic translation.
Okay, intersemiotic translation is a dense term. How does the paper define that?
Right, so semiotics is the study of signs and symbols and how we interpret them. Intersemiotic translation means taking a concept that exists in one sign system, like the written word, ink on paper, editorial footnotes, and translating it into a completely different sign system, like audio-visual media.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, the academic paper argues that the found manuscript didn't disappear. It translated its mechanics into the language of modern film, giving birth to the found footage genre.
So the ink smudges and fake editor's footnotes of an 18th century novel translate into the shaky cam, dropped frames, and timestamp overlays of a movie.
Exactly. That means the Blair Witch Project from 1999, the Spanish zombie film REC from 2007, the entire Paranormal Activity franchise, they aren't modern inventions at all.
They are the direct descendants of the Castle of Otranto.
The exact same narrative machinery is at work. In the Blair Witch Project, the filmmakers famously presented the movie as genuine recovered footage of missing students.
They even built fake police reports on a website.
They did. They used the imperfection of the medium, the grainy, shaky video, the poor audio, as proof of its authenticity, just as a Gothic writer would use descriptions of torn pages or faded ink to prove a manuscript was real.
I have to push back on this a little bit, though. When you look at the 18th century craze for these fake manuscripts or even the marketing for Blair Witch, is the found manuscript essentially just a historical version of pics or it didn't happen?
That's an interesting way to put it.
Right. Was this really about deep psychological fears, or was it just a cheap clickbait gimmick to trick gullible audiences into paying for a fictional story they thought was a true documentary?
Well, it's tempting to view it as just an 18th century clickbait gimmick, especially looking back with our modern skepticism, but that ignores the very real cultural anxiety of the era.
How so?
Yes, there was a commercial, voyeuristic element to it. But if we dig deeper into the psychology of the time, the 18th century was undergoing a massive shift. The Enlightenment was pushing rationalism, science, and documented history.
Everything had to be categorized and proven.
Precisely. And alongside that, there was a rapidly growing public interest in antiquarianism, digging up the past, finding lost Roman ruins, recovering lost knowledge, finding a lost text produced a genuine sense of awe.
Because it felt like you were touching a piece of history that survived the void of time.
Exactly. It made the reader feel privileged, like they were holding a rare, unique treasure that held forbidden knowledge. Furthermore, it exploited the public's susceptibility to conspiratorial thinking.
Which never goes out of style.
Never. As society became more structured and rational, there was a deep underlying desire to believe that there was a hidden, secret truth, a dark underbelly that the scientific establishment didn't know about, but this one crumbling manuscript could reveal it.
So the manuscript represents the idea that history isn't just what's written in the official records. History is full of dark, undocumented corners.
Exactly. It's the promise of a secret world.
Okay, so whether the object is a 14th century glass cup, a supposedly ancient Italian manuscript, or a rusty nail hidden in a wall, we understand how the narrative zip file is loaded. We know why it holds our attention.
Right.
But the sources point out something really crucial here. As literature evolved, the consequences of interacting with these objects changed drastically. What happens when you actually disturb the artifact?
And this brings us to a major turning point in the history of horror, the Jamesian Revolution.
The Jamesian Revolution. Okay, break this down for us.
To truly appreciate the Jamesian Revolution, we have to establish the baseline of what came before it. If we look at the Victorian era, The era of Charles Dickens or J. Sheridan Le Fanu ghost stories were wildly popular.
Especially around Christmas, right?
Yes, the Christmas ghost story was a massive tradition, but they operated on a very specific moral framework. Victorian ghost stories were primarily about restorative justice.
Restorative justice. Okay, think of Jacob Marley in A Christmas Carol. He's terrifying, wrapped in chains, but he's there for a very specific, almost helpful reason.
Right, he's warning Scrooge to change his ways.
The classic Victorian ghost is a supernatural reaction to an unnatural act. If there was a murder, a theft of an inheritance, or an act of extreme greed, the ghost returned from the grave specifically to right that wrong.
They had a job to do. It would point a bony finger at the hidden will or haunt the murderer until they confessed. Once the injustice was resolved, the ghost was satisfied and returned peacefully to the afterlife.
It's almost comforting in a weird way. As scary as a ghost might be, it meant the universe had a fundamental moral balance.
It's exactly.
If you did something terrible, the supernatural machinery of the universe would kick in to balance the scales. The ghosts were basically supernatural detectives enforcing the law.
That's a great analogy. The Victorian universe had rules, boundaries, and logic. But then, at the turn of the 20th century, comes M.R. James.
He just flips the table.
Completely flips it. Now, James was not a pulp fiction writer. He was a highly respected, deeply learned Cambridge scholar, a provost of Eton, and a medievalist who actually discovered lost historical manuscripts and tombs in real life.
A real-world Indiana Jones of manuscripts.
Kind of. But when he sat down to write ghost stories to read to his friends by candlelight, he abandoned that Victorian moral comfort completely. He shocked the system.
Because James's ghosts do not care about justice.
Not at all.
They are invasive, they are unreasonable, and they are deeply physically terrifying. The essay we read from Old Style Tales Press notes that James introduced this shift in his very first published ghost story, Canon Alberic's Scrapbook, which he wrote in 1893.
A fantastic story. So good. The protagonist is an English antiquarian in France, and he buys a hauntingly ancient tome, a classic cursed object full of plundered manuscripts. And what does interacting with this object summon? Not a pale, sad Victorian ghost in a nightgown trying to fix a legal error.
No, it summons an absolute biological abomination.
Yes. The text describes the entity in horrifying detail. It isn't a translucent spirit. It manifests as a hairy, spidery demon with a shallow, yellowish jaw like a beast.
It's covered in matted hair. But the most chilling line James writes is how he describes the creature's eyes as it looks at the protagonist.
Oh, I know the line.
He writes there was an intelligence beyond that of a beast, below that of a man.
Below that of a man, beyond that of a beast. That line gives me absolute chills. Because it implies a terrifying middle ground. It means you can't reason with it like a human, you can't appeal to its sense of justice, but it's smart enough to hunt you, to trap you, and to take pleasure in your terror.
It has no human empathy. None. And what makes James's entities so uniquely terrifying is their physical intimacy. Victorian ghosts stood at the end of dark hallways and moaned. James's ghosts get right up in your personal space.
It's a shocking departure from English decorum, really. James's spirits are notable for their loathsome, undeniable materiality. They aren't projections, they have weight and texture.
They touch you.
They grope, they grab, and they cozy up to their victims in incredibly violating ways. A perfect example of this is perhaps his most famous story, "Oh, whistle, and I'll come to you, my lad."
This story is the ultimate example of the cursed object trope. A rationalist, skeptical professor is on a golfing holiday. He finds an ancient, buried whistle in the ruins of a temple preceptory on the beach.
He digs it up, cleans it off, and despite knowing better, he blows it.
And by blowing it, he activates the trap. But again, he doesn't summon a noble Templar knight to right a historical wrong.
No, he wakes up in his inn room to find that the spare bed next to his is occupied. An entity has formed itself out of the crumpled linens of the empty bed.
Which is just so creepy.
It's a blind, faceless, groping mass of bed sheets, violently feeling around for him in the dark, trying to push him out the window.
It's terrifying because it violates the ultimate sanctuary.
Yeah.
Your bedroom. A ghost made of your own hotel bed sheets is an incredible corruption of safety. But here is the brilliant twist in James's universe that the sources point out. The true villains in his stories aren't actually the hairy spider demons or the groping bedsheet monsters.
Right.
The true villains are the human beings who disturbed the objects in the first place.
James had a very specific term for them. He despised what he called pestilent innovators.
Pestilent innovators. I love that phrase.
It's great. Because James was a real-world medieval scholar, He had a profound reverence for the accumulated wisdom and the physical architecture of the past. In his story, The Ash Tree, he introduces a character named Sir Richard Fell.
And Fell is the quintessential pestilent innovator.
He really is. He inherits his ancestral home, a beautiful, historic block of mellow red brick. But Fell has more money than sense, and he decides to tear the historic home apart to build an Italian-style palace simply because it's the modern fashion.
And he pays a gruesome price for it. He dismisses local superstitions, ignores the history of the house, moves into a cursed bedroom next to an ancient ash tree, and meets a horrific end involving giant, venomous spiders.
James is preaching a very specific philosophical point here. He is warning against intellectual hubris. He is attacking the generational chauvinism of assuming that modern rational people are inherently smarter, safer, or superior to their ancestors.
That arrogance of the present.
Yes. When humans tear down old churches, disregard local folklore, or cavalierly dig up ancient objects without understanding why they were buried in the first place, they strip away the communal historical protection that those traditions provided.
Because there's a reason they were buried.
Exactly. The consequences fall heavily on those who treat history as a dead, irrelevant playground.
It's basically the Socratic paradox applied to horror. True wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. In James's world, you have to have enough respect for the unknown to admit you don't have all the answers. If you march into an ancient ruin acting like you've mastered the universe is going to send a hairy demon into your hotel room to violently prove you wrong.
It's a harsh lesson.
Very harsh.
In the Jamesian universe, the hidden object acts as an external trap. You disturb the ancient crown or you blow the cursed whistle, and a monster from the outside chases you. It's an external threat activated by your hubris. But our sources map out one final, brilliant evolution.
Oh, this is where it shifts again.
Yes. As we move from the Edwardian era into modern literature, the narrative technology of the hidden object shifts again. It moves from being an external trap to something far more insidious, an internal mirror.
This is where we get into the psychological evolution of the cursed object. If the Victorian and Edwardian eras said, disturb this ancient artifact and a monster will chase you, the modern era of horror says, find this artifact and you will be forced to face the monster already inside you.
We see this transition perfectly embodied in a critical framework called folk Gothic, as explored by academic Don Keatley.
Let's talk about folk Gothic.
Now, folk Gothic is a fascinating subgenre because Keatley is very careful to distinguish it from its more famous cousin, folk horror.
Right, because when we think of folk horror, we often think of literal incarnate monsters or shocking acts of bodily violence. Think of movies like The Wicker Man or Midsommar, where a cult sacrifices an outsider in a field.
Exactly. Folk Gothic removes the literal monsters and the overt violence. Instead, it focuses its dread on temporal and spatial structures. It focuses intensely on the landscape, the architecture, and the things left behind within them.
Our literary notes point to Shirley Jackson's masterpiece, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, as the ultimate litmus test for this folk Gothic shift. Have you read this one?
Oh, it's brilliant.
In the novel, the main character, Merrick Blackwood, lives in a massive, isolated family home. And throughout the story, she actively buries objects all over the property. She buries marbles in the dirt. She buries boxes of silver dollars. She nails books to the trees in the orchard.
And she tells herself they are safeguards.
Yes, safeguards.
But the brilliance of Jackson's writing and how it aligns with folk Gothic is that the reader quickly realizes these objects have no magical power whatsoever. They aren't ancient Templar artifacts warding off demons.
No.
They are unsettling physical manifestations of Merrick's own deeply fragile, obsessive, and traumatized psychology. The objects don't summon a monster from the woods to attack the house. They serve as a breadcrumb trail, revealing to the reader that the monster is already inside the house.
And she is the one burying the marbles. It's basically psychological shrapnel. The objects are a manifestation of repressed memory, isolation, and guilt. And this ties right back into Keatley's theory of folk Gothic. Keatley argues that this genre actively loosens anthropocentrism. Let's break that down because it's a vital concept.
Right. Anthropocentrism is the belief that human beings are the central, most important entities in the world. We assume the universe revolves around us.
But in folk Gothic, the setting itself, the landscape, the soil, the old Victorian house becomes an active character with its own subconscious.
It is a profound shift in narrative technology. When a story establishes that a house has objects, Witch bottles, children's shoes, rusted nails, intentionally sewn into its very fabric. The architecture is no longer just a passive backdrop for human drama.
It's alive.
The house becomes a vessel for inherited trauma. The objects are the memories of the land made physical.
So when a protagonist pulls that bottle out of the wall, what does this all mean for them?
Yeah.
It means their ultimate sanctuary is compromised. In traditional storytelling, your home is a fortress. It's where you lock the door to stay safe from the dark woods outside. But by hiding objects within the walls, under the floorboards, or up in the rafters, modern writers reveal that the very structures meant to protect us might actually be trapping ancient, secret wavelengths inside with us.
The roof keeps the rain out, but the floorboards keep the ghosts in.
Exactly. It creates a pervasive, suffocating atmospheric dread. The protagonist, and by extension the reader, suddenly realizes they do not understand the rules of the environment they are standing in.
And that realization is terrifying. The discovery of the hidden object alienates them from their own reality, forcing them to confront the buried secrets of their own familial history, their own psychology, rather than fighting an external bogeyman.
We have covered a massive amount of historical and literary ground today. We started by unpacking the foundation. How cursed objects act as narrative zip files, compressing immense history and complex trauma into a single tangible item you can hold in your hand.
We really went everywhere. We looked at the incredible real-world myth-making around the 14th century Luck of Edenhall, tracing how antiquarians and poets literally spoke a fairy curse into existence over centuries.
And terrified even H.P. Lovecraft. We explored the found manuscript as a sophisticated metafictional tool to blur reality, evolving from Don Quixote all the way to the shaky cam terror of the Blair Witch Project.
We then charted the evolution of the supernatural threat itself. We saw the transition from the polite, restorative justice of Victorian ghosts to the chaotic, boundary-breaking, physical terror of M.R. James's entities, which existed specifically to punish the intellectual hubris of pestilent innovators.
And finally, we analyzed how modern folk Gothic literature, through brilliant writers like Shirley Jackson, turned the cursed object inward, transforming it from a monster summoning trap into a psychological mirror, reflecting our own internal repressed traumas.
It's a fascinating journey.
It really is. So, to the listener, the next time you find yourself at a dusty garage sale or walking through the echoing halls of a historic house, take a moment to really look at the items around you. Ask yourself, what narrative zip file am I looking at right now?
What's hiding in plain sight?
Exactly. What centuries-old story, what forgotten trauma or quiet tragedy is waiting to be unpacked the second I pick up that tarnished silver mirror or that stopped pocket watch?
And, this raises one final unsettling thought to leave you with. Throughout this entire exploration, we have focused on finding cursed or hidden objects from the past. But what mundane objects are we leaving behind right now?
Oh, that's a creepy thought.
Think about it. We live in an era of unprecedented, obsessive documentation. Think about the massive amounts of data you have hidden away. A forgotten digital cloud account, an old encrypted hard drive stuffed in the back of a closet, a locked social media profile of someone who has passed away.
Just sitting there in the dark.
Exactly. What unspoken psychological residue, what modern anxieties are we abandoning in those digital spaces, just waiting to be unearthed by someone decades from now? What data zip files will become the deeply misunderstood, cursed found manuscripts of the future?
That is a deeply terrifying thought to end on. Because maybe the rusted iron nail tied with human hair hidden to the Victorian wall isn't nearly as dangerous or as revealing as the forgotten hard drive buried in a cardboard box in your basement.
You never know what you'll unpack.
You really don't. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the dark corners of storytelling. Until next time, be careful what you dig up.